Good morning. I will convene this meeting of the Board of County Commissioners for Tuesday, July 9th, 2024. Welcome to everyone in Harris Hall, to anyone who may be watching online. And please note, we do have all 5 commissioners present today. Commissioner Buck is joining us virtually. And we have a little bit of an unusual morning, but we're going to do our best to stay on time. Because we do have a 9:30 time certain for those of you here to weigh in on the Charter Review Committee's work. But we will start by checking to see if there are any adjustments to the agenda. Seeing none. Any emergency business this morning from County Administration? Thank you. Then the first item we have, and this is always a great way to start our meetings, is employee recognition. And this will be about a 15-minute item, and I will turn it over to our Director of Public Works, Dan Hurley, to share, and our Acting County Administrator, Greg Rigoff, to share with us what department and the folks that we're recognizing and their wonderful work. Good morning. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. We do have a full room today, and a lot of those individuals are county staff, and so our ability to go first is greatly appreciated. Today we have the Land Management Division receiving recognition for some focused work over the last handful of months. In this past year, the Land Management Division of Public Works has successfully reduced the average Type 1 land use permit processing timeline from 49 days to 30 days, reduced the average Type 2 land use permit processing timeline from 102 days to 65 days, reduce the average residential combination building permit processing timeline from 34 days to 31 days, and reduce the average commercial building permit processing timeline from 52 days to 17 days. Those reductions in wait times up to nearly 70% in the commercial building permits represents an improvement in the end for customer service. We really do appreciate the work, and of course I have a warm place in my heart as a survivor of the Holiday Farm fire. It's a team that I've had a chance to work with. We really appreciate their focus on solutions and their passion to serve.
Thank you, Greg. I would just like to add that the Land Management Division, all the employees in the division do really challenging work. They're required to implement very rigid state building and land use code, and they're in a difficult position where no matter which direction they fall on things, somebody's going to be upset. There's pro-development, anti-development, environmental interest, political interest, and you often see week after week people who are frustrated with land management here talking about the situation. Sometimes it's a situation they've gotten themselves into by building an unpermitted structure, and sometimes there's just a frustration of the process and the limitations in the system. But the employees in the division are doing outstanding work, and I think it's a story that hasn't really been lifted in front of you, and so we're excited to do that here today. So Greg mentioned the pretty dramatic decreases in permit times, and that's a result of fine work by the entire division, and we're going to recognize a few people who are able to be here today. Our inspectors are out in the field doing the work, and we couldn't bring everybody in here, but wanted to recognize a team of individuals who's really made that happen. And it didn't just happen. This was very intentional work to get at their permit times. Through coordinated effort, they've done some restructuring. There's a coordinated services team that better handles the intake, and then all the people that people need to see on the process. They've done a lot of work around data analytics, developing Tableau dashboards that can show the trends over time and identify permits when they're rising above where our benchmarks want to be, so we can put more effort on those. They've changed a number of processes to improve the customer experience and help us just make things move smoother and faster and make the experience better for folks. And so I want to recognize all these people for making that change happen and for doing this great work that they're doing. In addition to those permit times, they've also reduced the time that people wait in the lobby. We don't take appointments at this time, so people were waiting sometimes in excess of 45 minutes. The average lobby time is now about 10 to 15 minutes to see a planner or builder. So a lot of improvements, and we're still making improvements. We're about to launch an electronic system where people can can file documents online and see where they're at in the process. And we'll be talking with you in the months to come as we launch that new system. So great work. Would like to call people's names and have them come up and receive a certificate.
So why don't I call the names and you can hand out the certificates? And I apologize in advance for butchering names. Shauna Adams, Jared Botter, Amber Bell, Brittany Brown, Emily Connor, Andy Cook, Ron Eggleston, Lindsay Eichner, Emma Enberg, Rihanna Foster, Keir Miller, Marion Nolte, Chris Baculo, Ryan Rook, Norre Spalding, Michaela Vinson, and John Webster.
I didn't realize Keir would be here. Keir is the manager of the division, and he could say a few words too, probably.
Thanks.
Some back and
Morning,
forth about whether
Commissioners.
you'd be here, Keir, because we understood you're on a little bit of time off. So thank you for joining us this morning.
I am on TM, but I'll come in for this. This is much appreciated, the recognition. I, again, just want to recognize that this is just, maybe a third of the staff here that really make this work happen. They've all done an incredible job and are just really, we've got a great team now, probably the best I've seen in my 20 years here at the county, that's very passionate about the work and wants to help and is engaged. So I want to recognize all of their efforts. Also want to appreciate Steve Mokrahysky, Greg, and Dan for all the support they've given us these past few years to build our staffing levels up and to maintain those staffing levels. And that's been really key in hitting some of these goals and benchmarks that we've been striving for. So we'll keep up the work, and we appreciate this recognition. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. I will turn it over to the board if anyone wants to make a comment on this item of employee recognition to the board. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I too want to appreciate the team. I know that the road commissioners probably work with the team a lot more than perhaps some of the others. And in particular, I've worked with many of you through the thick of permitting and the aftermath of the Holiday Farm fire and trying to get through that backlog, as well as trying to reduce the times that people wait for permits as you review them, is just excellent work. I know that each and every one of you is doing a wonderful job and the ultimate professional, and I thank you for what you're doing, and also want to thank you for continuing to work for Lane County and for the residents that you're serving. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I could just do a quick sports analogy, raising the bar is always the toughest thing, but you only get to raise the bar during adversity. So I appreciate that you work through adversity and you're persevering through all the tough customers and tough requests and tough laws and statutes that you have to adhere to. So good on you for raising the bar and continue to do so. Proud of you. Good job.
Commissioner Seneca.
Yes, thanks everybody for coming out here, and this is a great way to start off our meeting. As Commissioner Buck said, I think some of us probably work with the staff in LMD more than others, just because of where we're at. But it's great to see, Mr. Webster back there. You and I have worked through, walked through different jobs before that were just kind of a mess, and watching you work to get that into compliance or trying to get it into compliance, really appreciate it. Amber went somewhere. There she is. When your compliance officer gets a positive letter that we just got last week, that's a good sign that we are doing great things throughout the department. So, seeing these numbers drop, everybody's saying it, our governor's saying it, we need housing, we need housing, we need housing. This is all part of getting there. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Fart.
I have a couple of things that I kind of pay attention to. The gifts that people give. Somebody gives you money, that's a wonderful thing. If somebody gives you a present, that's a wonderful thing. If somebody gives you time, that is irreplaceable. That is irreplaceable. 1 day, 1 hour, 1 minute is irreplaceable. And we're talking about from 49 days to 30 days. We're talking about 102 days to 65 days. We're talking about the gift of time that doesn't grow on trees. You can't print time. What you're doing for people, giving them time, is irreplaceable. Thank you so much for the hard work that goes into that.
I'll just echo all these great comments and add a particular shout out to the members of the team that couldn't join us. Being out in the field, doing their work, it takes all of you to make this work happen and to get these numbers where they are. So well-deserved, well-earned. I know we as a board, particularly just coming out of budget season, this is a division where we all want to see more resource go in, but where that's going to come from is the challenge, as it is for so many of our departments. So the fact that you are improving services and doing more, even though there's less and less resource with which to do it, adds a special layer of importance and noteworthiness to this accomplishment that you've shared with us today. So thank you all so much for your great work and for choosing Lane County. We appreciate you. Thank you. I think Devin would like to get a group photo outside, so folks that were here for employee recognition, please help her out by collecting as a group out there so she can get that photo so we can share with the world, or at least the rest of Lane County, our appreciation. That takes us into the public comment section of our meeting, and this first section is for general public comment on any topic other than charter review. We have a 9:30 agenda item that is a public hearing for comment on charter review related comments. So we will move into our regular public comment. So far I have 3 people signed up here in Harris Hall. And I will give an opportunity to add, if other folks joined us beyond the time when the sign-up sheet was handed up here. But we will do who's signed up, then we'll move to anyone signed in online to give public comment, general public comment, then we'll check back in the hall to see if there's anyone who wants to give general comment. As I said, we do have a 9:30 time certain for the public comment on charter review, and so we may need to move around a little bit or reserve commissioner comments in response to public comment, depending how we're doing for time. So with that, I will call your name. When I do, please come to the podium here and state your name for the record, and then keep an eye on this 3-minute timer, which will begin when you state your name. So the first person up is Mike, looks like Della Vergas. Please correct me when you get to the podium. Thank you. Apologies. Welcome, good morning. Please state your name for the record, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Mike D. Laverne. Close enough. I'm here to talk about Shredfest. I know it's been a topic going around the city for the last, week. But we've had we want to be able to do this event again here. There's been more public review on positive towards this event than negative by a long shot. We understand that some of the neighbors are not happy with the type of noise it is, but at the end of the day, we followed every rule that this county has put forth. The noise violation, we were well within our noise. The smoke in the air, it's not actually smoke, it's actually steam for burning tires. It's not lighting them on fire. It's not polluting the air with burning tires like they've made it sound like it is. The way noise works, and this room's a great example, you guys, this whole room's designed to be acoustically sound to project out here. It's also designed when you walk out of the room to not be able to hear it out there. Noise does not travel straight through buildings. Where our event takes place, the neighbors that were complaining about stuff all around the neighborhood, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 decibels. It's not loud, but what the problem is it's a noise that people aren't used to. Just like a jackhammer outside working on a construction zone. It's a noise. I, for one, am not a country music fan. Although I grew up in Junction City, not a country music fan. Does that mean we should ban it? No. Everyone enjoys things differently. I travel the entire country literally yearly right now. All I do is travel the country to different events. My company hosts major events. We're well aware of noise. We're well aware of what these events do. We're also well aware of how many smiles we brought to the community. We're aware of how this helps benefit drivers and the safety of drivers in this community. You see Portland and all the takeovers that are taking place. This takes people off the streets. Before the takeover started in Portland, there was a track called Pat's Acres. Every month there was an open drift there. With that drift, it kept people off the streets. Since that closed down, all the street takeovers have taken place. Sonoma Drift, that's in California. San Francisco is one of the leading spots for takeovers that take over the streets and do bad things. That was all eliminated because they opened up drift weekly on a Wednesday to be able to do this. I understand the location of this area is not the most ideal, but we're not doing any harm. The fare is 5 times louder than we are. It projects. The speaker that's put in at, or Autzen Stadium, you don't hear people complain about Autzen Stadium because they like the noise. Just because someone doesn't like the noise, there are a lot more people that do. I, for one, love the noise of engines. I love the noise of cars shredding around the track. It's what I travel the country for. So I don't think just because a couple of people in an area dislike a noise, that should rule out our event taking place there. It's an event center. You don't move next to a train track and then complain the train track's too loud. I mean, I feel like this follows the same policy. So I'd like to see what I can do to work with you guys.
Thank you for your public comment. Thank you. Next up is Cheryl Purcell, who will be followed by Mary Beckman. Oh, did you just want to submit something in writing? Thank you. All right. Then we will move on to Mary Beckman. Please welcome, come to the podium, state your name for the record, and your time will begin.
Mary Beckman. I'm here in opposition to the Lane County Commissioner's decision to build a clean lane resource recovery facility in Goshen, Oregon. Lane County is proposing an 8% fee increase in 2024 and 2025, followed by 6% increases in 2026 and 2027. And of course, that doesn't include the annual 3% fee increase that helps maintain the current levels of service. This increase may not seem like a lot to you, but is a significant amount to those in the rural areas that rely on garbage pickup by companies such as Ecosystems. Many of these community members are on fixed incomes. Some are at poverty level. I have volunteered at the Goldson Food Pantry for over 6 years out in Cheshire, located at the Goldson Grange. And we help 40 to 60 families each month with their food needs. These are the same families that rely on garbage pickup at a reasonable cost. Currently, my bill is $31. If an 8% increase was imposed to me by the company that picks up my garbage, that would be an increase of $2.48 a month, not the 50 to 60 cents per month that was mentioned in a statement to the local news station. That amount could purchase a gallon of milk for these families in need. I'm asking the commissioners to look at alternatives before signing a contract that could unnecessarily cost Lane County millions of dollars. I also like to thank Commissioner Senega for responding to my email I sent earlier. It's nice to know that someone did read it and acknowledged it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, we'll move to see if there's anyone registered online who wishes to give general public comment, and then we'll check back in the hall one more time before we move on from this item. Tanya, is there anyone online wishing to give public comment on a general topic other than the charter review?
Thank you, Chair. If you are online and would like to give regular public comment at this time, we will do Charter Review Committee at the 9:30 time certain. Please raise your virtual hand. I don't see any virtual hand. Oh, hang on. Jolene, I've allowed you to talk. Would you like to give regular public comment today? Go ahead and unmute yourself. I've asked you to unmute. Can you go ahead and unmute?
Yeah, sorry. I would like to give comment at 9:30. I misunderstood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other virtual hands raised, so I'll return the regular public comment back to you.
Thank you, Tanya. And I understand we do have at least one person who arrived who wishes to comment on something other than charter review. Please come to the podium, state your name for the record, and then your 3 minutes will begin, and the timer is up here on the wall for you.
Hello, Melanie Stanley, Blue River. I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing from me, but you'll just get to hear from me again. So I am here. I walked in while you guys were finishing giving accolades to building and planning. I'm here to complain about building and planning, so I apologize. First, I'd like to say Marianne Nolte and Becky Taylor are pretty much my angels at this point, and I will say thank you to them every single time I talk to you guys. First, we submitted the plans to build my store on 5/3 of this year. I've never got an email back until 6/11, and that was when I initiated contact. And thank God for Marianne, because she's the one who literally walked down to the planning office and said, hey, they need some contact. When I finally received an email back, they said that they would have my review letter by July 1st. I did finally get that review letter, and it had 37 separate edits that needed to be made for my plans to even see possibly the permit process. Which I'm fine. I understand that there's a process. I get it. And especially with commercial review, it's all different. But here's my issue. I'm quickly running into deadlines with my insurance, with the OLCC for my licensing, and the building season. I so far have waited 4 years. 4 years. I've gone through code amendments, road edits, road widths, and right-of-way readjustments just to get my building permitted. I'm running out of time. I now have to resubmit my plans for the second time. Trying not to get emotional, but I'm done. I'm sorry. For the second time, to hopefully get them to the top of the planner's pile. That may or may not take another 5 to 8 weeks for him to even look at them again, to maybe get another plan review for a building that was supposed to be guaranteed to be able to be put back there by House Bill 2289. I am at my wit's end. And every time we tell anybody, Heather Buck was super helpful with getting any of this even taken care of in the first place, thankfully. But every time we call, every time we have anybody check into it, it's we're understaffed, we're overworked, and we are doing the best we can. Expedited permits are not 11 weeks out. Expedited permits are 5 weeks out, should be. I should not still be waiting for a building 4 years later. I am looking at making a $1 million investment just to put this building back up. For trying to redo economic recovery, this is not acceptable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your public comment. That concludes public comment on general topics, and so we do have a few minutes before our 9:30 time certain for any commissioner response or other remonstrance. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for everybody who spoke. Clearly, the last speaker, Melanie Stanley, I wanted to chat to. Specifically, I know that you've been through the ringer, and so have a lot of people upriver, and you're doing the best that you can. I'll continue to work with you directly and anybody else that's having a challenge up there to see how we can continue to get your commercial building up and running. We're really struggling with getting any commercial rebuilding upriver. Specifically, there's not a lot of support, from the state or federal government for private commercial builders to put their buildings back up, for brick and mortar stores. There just isn't. So it's a major struggle, not only to finance it, but then, as Molly mentioned, the permitting process is just different for commercial than it is for residential. Just know that I'm here for you, and I will continue to work with you and the building department to see what I can do to help. And if there's anything that the permitting department suggests for us that could assist as a policy team, I'd welcome that as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to talk direct to Mary Beckman. You're a single voice in the room today, Mary Beckman. You understand, I'm certain, that you represent a lot of people with the same message that you deliver today. Over the course of the last several months, we've received more comments on that particular issue, on what is now called Clean Lane Recycling Facility, the IMRF. We've received more comments on that than pretty much everything else combined. Something that I personally pay close attention to, everything that is said regarding that, and your voice is, your words are heard. We hear them loud and clear. And thank you for providing your testimony, which once again represented so many people.
Commissioner Seneca.
Yes. Well, thanks everybody. Mr. De Laverne, sorry I didn't recognize you out there. It's been a long time since we were on the soccer fields together. It's interesting to hear a different side of the event, because we were, I wouldn't say flooded with emails, but we received quite a few complaints, and I'm going to call some legitimate complaints. You know, we also get complaints during the logging convention about the event being there. We also get complaints during the county fair, and I'm certain if the M's would have gone through, that would have been a whole nother level of complaints. So, it is an event center, so it's kind of one of those things where we're going to have to weigh: are we going to continue to have these events and just continue to field complaints, or is it maybe time that the Lane Event Center moves somewhere else that's a little more hospitable? But that's a big conversation. But thanks for coming and representing what you guys did. Mary, Ms. Beckman, I didn't recognize you back there either, so it's good to see you. And thanks for bringing that up. You do represent a lot of people that have a lot of concerns, and I think we can call them the concerns on an investment of that magnitude that is going to raise the fees for everybody. And especially, as you mentioned, the work you do in our rural communities. I mean, that's huge. That represents who we are as a community, and small increases in some parts of Lane County may not be considered small increases in others. So thanks for being the voice out here. Hi, Melanie. That's just kills me to hear and listen to, because you know, you're a leader in your neighborhood or in your community, and our LMD department does great at a lot of things, but there is certainly things we can work on, and your example is a perfect one. You know, $1 million investment into a store that is not just a store, it's the hub. I mean, it is. So that's something that we need to work on and get over the finish line. Absolutely. Thanks for coming and talking to us.
Vice Chair.
Yeah, thank you. We just have a few minutes, so I'll probably talk fast, so hopefully put your fast listeners on. Mary, the fact that you brought out that the first increase of $2 could buy someone a gallon of milk really puts that in perspective. So I'm going to thank you for that, because sometimes we just throw these numbers out like they're insignificant, and they do make a big difference in people's lives. So thank you for that. That was really enlightening. Mike, you said it best when you said, why would you move next to a railroad track and then complain about the noise? I agree with you. This is an event center. We got to find a way to make this happen. I think the thing that disturbs me most about this is that takeovers of streets, the potential danger and fatalities of that is impossible to imagine. And so I think putting the safety umbrella over the top of this discussion is something I think really needs to be brought to the table. So thank you for bringing that up. I also love the sound of engines. V8s are my favorite, so there you go. Love what you're doing. And Melody, this is the other thing too. Grocery stores make communities. If you look at downtown Springfield, we waited a year to put a grocery store in a vacant space. We had weed stores, all kinds of people offering my development company 3 times what we were asking for rent, which, you know, if you're a business guy, you'd probably want to take that. But we knew that a grocery store is a hub of a community, and for you to make $1 million investment into the hub of a community should get priority. And so we're going to see to it that happens. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone who took time to come out and give comment. In the interest of time, I'll just say we got, by my count, close to 50 emails on Shredfest, and I I also received several calls and texts as the commissioner whose district the event center is in. The commissioners don't make decisions about what vendors to rent to, and so Lane Event Center management is certainly taking a look at making sure that what vendors present is what is going to happen, and I will leave it in their capable hands to figure out criteria for rentals in the future. And as far as the fate of the event center, that is a much longer term possibility and conversation that we are just starting down that path, re-engaging in that. So stay tuned on that. And so with that, I think we can skip over consent calendar and do that after this next item, which is a county administration item. This is a public hearing and order number 24-07-09-11 regarding the Lane County Home Rule Charter amendments. And I will welcome to the table staff Judy Williams, Chief of Staff, Jenna Cusimano from our Community and Economic Development Office, and our clerk from Elections, Dina Dawson. And I will leave it to staff to determine who's saying what, when, and in what order. And we'll have a brief presentation from staff, and then we will open the public hearing. And it looks like Stephen Thiel from our Office of County Counsel is joining at the table as well. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Chair Trieger, Vice Chair Lovell, Commissioners. We're here before you again today for a discussion about proposed charter amendments that were initially brought to you by the Charter Review Committee, and we've since heard some additional ones added by the public. Just to provide a quick overview in advance of the public hearing, we're going to talk about how the Charter Review Committee engaged their process and the public, how we've spoken with the board, the specific sections that they had recommended for both repeal or revision. Dina, our county clerk, will be on hand to discuss about potential expenses related to putting any of these measures on the ballot, and then we'll also talk about some potential next steps after today. So from December 2022 through October 2023, the Charter Review Committee met bi-monthly, engaging staff and conducting public outreach, including a number of surveys, offering public comment opportunities at each of the meetings. October 11th, 2023, the committee presented their final report and recommendations to the board, which was subsequently followed up by a work session on November 8th. And then more recently, April 30th, the board specifically heard and discussed the repeal recommendations, and at that time decided to move forward with a public hearing. Subsequently, the following week on May 7th, you heard about the revision recommendations and also moved to hold a public hearing on those. June 26th, we had our first public hearing on the 6 charter amendment recommendations, and today we'll be holding our second, and as Judy will discuss later, about potential opportunities for further board discussion. So just again, a quick high-level overview of those recommended charter repeals. Section 32, around the spending limitation. Section 33, East Alton Baker Park. Section 34, the income tax cap. And then the 3 sections recommended for revisions, and this is, as you all know, is the areas where there's been the most discussion and engagement from both the public as well as the board. So to revise the titles and descriptions of commissioner districts, section 10.3.c. To revise the redistricting process and establish the independent redistricting committee in the charter, sections 10.3.d and 10.3.e. And then to revise the Charter Review Committee, which is section 35. And then we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Dina to talk a little bit about the dates associated with elections and upcoming ballots.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dina Dawson, County Clerk for the record. I put together just a quick table of some deadlines, and we'll go on to discuss the cost to the county. Basically, beginning yesterday through August 16th, the board may order that any measure relating to an amendment or revision or repeal of charter may be referred to the primary or general election ballot. Once that order is determined, County Council must file with the Clerk's office the ballot title within 5 business days. August 27th is basically the very last day that the entire package would need to be submitted to the clerk's office if any of the charter amendments were to be included in the state voters pamphlet. And that would be a new deadline 49 days from today. So I usually try to do that countdown. 49 days is a short period of time. So by that time, noon on August 27th, I would need to have the measure filing forms, explanatory statement, all arguments and statements or endorsements for each measure if it was to appear in the state voters pamphlet. And then I wanted to go on and talk a little bit about the cost of putting an amendment or a measure on the ballot. And this has been a fun experiment for me as I tried to find a way to take something that's incredibly complicated and simplify it. But basically, the framework for billing out election cost is regulated by the section OAR, or the Oregon Administrative Rules, and it establishes uniform billing system for elections. It encompasses all state, county, city, and special districts elections as authorized under their principal acts. And so I went back and looked at general elections from years past to try to gauge what the November election of this year might look like. And based on the billable items that we can bill for, which is printing, that includes ballots and envelopes, personnel, all extra help, and staff overtime, supplies, even including toner, everything that goes into conducting an election, the zip ties to put the envelopes together. We track each of those, itemize those, and then bill those out. Mileage covers transportation for our ballot collection teams to pick up from all of the 21 drop boxes. Computer services includes technical support and training for our voting system, ballot sorting machines. Postage, incredibly expensive. Every year when postage rates go up, it affects the cost of elections as well. And we mail a lot. We're a mail ballot state. Our miscellaneous expenses include what we pay out to our vendor to put all of our ballot packets together, and the amortization, I always have a difficult time saying that word, covers the tabulation system and software and hardware. So based on previous elections, I'm estimating that the amount for the presidential election, the billable amount, is going to be around $550,000. So knowing that that's likely going to be our billable amount based on the covered expenses, it will be apportioned out to all of the districts that participate. And in a general election, multiple jurisdictions will participate, and each district share of the billable election expense is determined through apportionment, which considers the number of races and measures that appear on the ballot and the voter registration total for each participating district. So the calculation steps is where it gets a little complicated. Believe it or not, I count votes for a living, but I'm not the best at math, so I like formulas and spreadsheets. The Secretary of State's office puts together and prescribes the forms that we use to determine the aggregate cost and how much is billed. So for the aggregate registration calculation, we basically take the number of races, the number of measures, and we multiply that by the registration total. So to break that down a little bit, the county's registration is on average right now 275,000 voters. I'm estimating that we're going to be at 280,000 at least by the general election because voter registration ticks up in a presidential election year. So with 275,000 ballots, 2,000 voters, we would multiply that times the number of races that the district, races or measures that the district puts on the ballot. So just as an example, if the cost per ballot ended up being 10 cents each, and I'll get into that piece next, if the county was to place one measure on the ballot, the billable amount would be, or could be, $227,500. So if the cost of the allocated cost, per ballot was 10 cents, and we had one measure on, we would multiply that times the 275,000 voters. If we place 10 measures, for example, the aggregate registration would be 275,000 times 10, so 1,650,000 times the 10 cents would mean that the billable amount to the county would be 165,000. So basically, in summarizing that, the number of measures and races in an election brings down the apportioned cost per ballot, but every measure or race in a jurisdiction increases the aggregate voter registration, which drives up the billable election expense to the jurisdiction. And to just circle back to the apportioned cost per ballot, the billable election expenses is divided by the total aggregate registration to determine that cost per ballot. And so in order to determine the billable charge to each district, we take the apportioned cost per ballot and we multiply that times the aggregate registration, and that's what we charge out to the district. So hopefully that didn't make it more complicated. It took me a minute to put those together, and even in the slide, tried to simplify it as much as possible. But in summary, really, the more measures and races that we have will drive up the expense. That was all that I had on timeline and expenses.
Okay, thanks. Judy Williams, Chief of Staff, we just have one more slide and then we'll turn it over for the public hearing. But just wanted to reiterate next steps and process. So as mentioned before, if the board was interested in pursuing the November 2024 election, as we've been talking about, that August 16th is that absolute deadline. So after today, there are three additional meetings, July 16th, July 30th, and August 6th, to move in that direction. So that would take board action. In your packet and in the materials, you do have a board order that speaks to moving any of those items forward, as well as ballot title that is attached to. If there was an interest by the board, which you do have that decision to place any one of the measures, if you were moving any forward, if you were interested in putting those in the voters pamphlet, that is also a board action. So there would be a need to establish a committee, so 3 to 5 members to, seat a committee to work on the explanatory statement. That could be, if you were moving one measure forward, if you were moving 6, that could potentially be multiple committees to work on an impartial, simple, and understandable explanatory statement. And that deadline, you do have a little bit more time, but as the clerk mentioned, the August 27th deadline is the drop deadline for that committee to have the final explanatory statements done and submitted. And then finally, we haven't touched on this too much in the presentations, but if you were moving forward, we wanted to just touch on some outreach and communications that would be part of the plan moving forward. So making sure that we do put some effort into communicating about what is going on the ballot. And then the final step is really September 5th, that filing form that's also submitted to elections that we're monitoring too. So those are just some final deadlines, cost information, and then we'll turn it back over to you, Chair, to run the public hearing. Thank you. And I will entertain just if there are any very brief clarifying questions. We do have a couple of minutes for that, for staff, and particularly for our clerk, because I think she needs to, you're not planning on staying through the hearing to get questions after, right?
Unless I'm needed.
Okay. So if there are any, I have a couple, but turn it over to the board. I will ask mine, just to be sure I was following you around cost. The rough TLDR of that is about $27,000 per measure, were we to put something on this November's ballot.
That was just a scenario or an example just to get you to understand the difference between placing one measure or 10 measures. The actual aggregate cost of registration is determined by the number of districts that submit items to appear on the ballot. And then additionally, of note, cities and the state do not pay for primary or general elections, but they are considered when we're determining the aggregate voter registration counts. So the cities and the state, if they submit items to appear on the ballot, which there will be many races that are going to appear on the ballot, they drive down the billable amount or the cost per ballot. And so appearing on a general or a primary election, the cost per ballot will be lower, but the state doesn't reimburse the county. So although the county will owe the county clerk's office a billable amount, say the state's portion of $300,000 based on what their bill would be, the county clerk's office is not reimbursed for that, so the county is not receiving those funds. So it's impossible to determine how much it's going to cost per measure until that September 5th deadline, when everyone has filed. And even at that time, it would only be an estimate because I won't know exactly how much it costs for those itemized expenditures that we'll be spending on the election. So whenever it comes to election billing, it's very complicated, and we really do not know until all of those various factors come together. So thank you for asking that question so I could clarify. That was merely an example to show the difference in what it would cost for placing one measure versus 10.
Thank you, that's helpful. My other two are probably much quicker to answer. Can you remind us, please, how many unique ballot combinations you had to produce for the last election?
It was 486 unique ballot combinations for the primary election.
And so any changes to district boundaries has a potential to impact that greatly.
Absolutely, 1,000%. Ballot styles are created based on the number of splits to a precinct, and a split is a difference within that precinct where different districts create that unique ballot style.
Thank you. And then the last question is on that last slide where you said if a voter's pamphlet is desired, a voter pamphlet statement, but we would actually Lane County would produce its own voter pamphlet because it would be a Lane County measure, or would we have the opportunity to insert statements in the Secretary of State's produced voter pamphlet?
Lane County only produces a county voters pamphlet in May elections of odd-numbered years. So the only voter pamphlet access for this election would be by the county participating for inclusion in the state voters pamphlet.
So it's if a voter pamphlet statement is desired, not a voter pamphlet. So there's not additional cost as far as producing a pamphlet, is my point.
Correct. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Could you bring up the expense to county overview of the election billing system slide again? Because there are people who are going to be paying a great deal of attention to that.
Of course.
And in many cases, myself included, interpreting in my language what it says. But I wanted to be very clear what you're saying on that particular slide. And that slide, I would love to make sure that it's available to everybody from this moment forward. It's online right now, I would guess.
It is as part of the packet, yes.
So to people watching, people in the audience, this is online, and this is that is the one that says apportionment of expenses. Expense to county overview of election billing system is the one. Got it. That's the one right there. So let's emblazon that in our minds, because those are the numbers that we need to pay attention to. And the number of ballots, every measure brings down the aggregate cost of the ballots, but every measure also adds to the number of voters.
Yes, exactly.
So the cost goes down on one side, but goes up on the other side. So it's hard to say where the sweet spot is going to be, where that balance is.
Absolutely.
And so it's not something that we can predict particularly.
Not even close. It makes it incredibly difficult because when every city or special district is considering placing an item on, they want to know how much it's going to cost, and it really is difficult to determine because until September 5th, when is the filing deadline for measures for special districts and cities, I really won't know the number of measures to determine the aggregate registration to determine the cost per ballot.
But no matter how many different ballots because of the different numbers of jurisdictions that participate, any county measure goes to all the ballots the same.
Yes.
It's the same language on all the ballots, no matter how many different ballots there are.
Yes, the county questions would appear on multiple ballots, but it would be the same exact language on each.
There's no change in cost to the regarding what the county puts on the ballots.
No.
That's clear to me then that it really doesn't affect things. And one thing that I think we all in this room agree to is that having voter access to elections, whatever the cost of the county, now I'm not saying this unlimited cost is acceptable, but whatever the cost, having people's access to elections as freely as possible and to the closest elections to what is pertinent to where they live specifically is of interest to all of us. And that's something we strive for. I know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. If there's nothing else from staff, I see Vice Chair has a quick question. I do want to honor the time of folks who came to testify. It's a question for
It's just
staff.
a quick question. You said the September 6th deadline was really the place where we're going to know the costs. If this was a cost-driven question, is that a point where a municipality or a voting district could say, too much money, we got to back out and pull the item? Or is it too late?
No, that is the deadline to withdraw a measure or to submit a measure. And we won't know the cost by the September 5th deadline. We will just know the number of measures that will appear on the ballot so that we can better estimate what the billable expense is going to be. It's a combination of the number of measures that are appearing on the ballot plus the itemized expense of what the election is going to, what the billable expenditures are going to be, which that we can sort of estimate. So yes, on the deadline of September 5th, that's the deadline to file or withdraw a measure for cities and special districts. They would have some idea of the number of other districts, but I won't know until the filing deadline at 5 p.m. that night, the number of folks that have filed. There really isn't a trick to figuring it out.
So in short, that's an answer of no if someone wants to say this is too expensive, we can't pull out after we know the amount.
Yes, once they have an estimate, correct.
Thanks.
Thank you. So if we take down the presentation so Tanya can put the clock up. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, looks like about 8 people signed up so far in-house. I understand there are at least 4 people signed up online. So I will read your name and also the next person so you can prepare. When I call your name, please come to the podium. You will have 3 minutes to speak. The clock is on the wall and will begin when you state your name for the record. I will go through the list of everyone who signed up to speak here in Harris Hall. Then I'll turn it over to Tanya to run the online, the queue for the online comment, and then I'll check back to see if anybody arrived late and still wishes to speak. And so with that, I will welcome first to the podium, please, Charlie Kaler. Welcome, good morning. Please come to the podium, state your name for the record, and your 3 minutes will begin, and Charlie will be followed by Becky Lipton.
Good morning, Chair Trigger and Commissioners. I'm Charles Keeler, Vice President of the League of Women Voters of Lane County, speaking in place of our President, Terry Parker, who is on a sabbatical in the Northwest Coast, sailing the Northwest coast of the U.S. and Canada. Let me explain the League and its missions, which informs how we make decisions about what we advocate for. The League is nonpartisan and does not support or oppose any political party or any candidate. The League promotes political responsibility through informed and active participation in government and acts on member-selected and researched governmental issues. I'm talking research on a massive level, starting locally and working through the hierarchy of state and national levels, coming to a consensus on the position. League of Women Voters of the United States position on redistricting, briefly stated, supports redistricting processes and enforceable standards that promote fair and effective representation at all levels of government, with maximum opportunity for public participation. The proposed charter change brought to you from Misters Long and Gary falls short of those standards. Our comments are detailed in the written testimony for this hearing and were already submitted. Thank you for considering the League's position. We urge you to forward the voters of the recommendations of your Charter Review Committee. Oh, and before I leave, our other important mission, we work to empower voters by registering them to vote, educating people on the issues, and encouraging them to vote. This is a very busy time for us. And I want to say something that's not from the League, but from my own opinion. Kudos to the Planning Commission staff. I served on the Planning Commission, and I always say that volunteerism gives the volunteer more than they take in that pursuit. And the planning staff taught me tact and diplomacy, and I want to thank them for that.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Becky Lipton, who will be followed by Lori Briggs.
Hi, thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to provide public comment. My name is Rebecca Lipton. I live in Springfield, and I was quite alarmed to learn that This board is considering putting on the ballot, on the November ballot, a last-minute secret proposal for redistricting that has not gone through any public review process. A legal review of redistricting proposal does not suffice for public review and scrutiny. I feel like there's been a hijack of public involvement and trust. This is not good governance, and it undermines the public trust. And I do not understand how a group of county commissioners have chosen to consider bypassing the agreed-upon, transparent and citizen-informed process of the Charter Review Committee. I would love to have an explanation for that. So I urge you all to stand by the transparent and citizen-informed recommendations put forward by the Charter Review Committee with regards to redistricting. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Lori Briggs, who will be followed by Daniel Isaacson.
Good morning. I'm Lori Briggs. I live in Springfield. For 45 years, I was an educator, special education teacher, and elementary school principal. And in my capacity in my career, I have served on a committee presenting to boards, and I have also been a board member. And one of the things that I had presented to me is a focus committee that followed all the rules and procedures and guidelines of a focus committee. And we received the proposal, and then we look at it. And that's the way most boards work. What I've never seen before is that a special interest group forms a proposal and lays it on the table and have it accepted for review. Because typically, when you're on a committee, you are the person that does the outreach to all those special interest committees. And so across the county, all these stakeholders and constituents and businesses and all these other special interests, League of Women Voters, maybe a Whitaker Neighborhood Committee, they were listened to by the committee, and they were vetted, all of their ideas. And then they compiled this, and they formed a proposal that took all these various views into consideration. If I had been a board member, and I was at another time, and I had a special interest person come up and lay before me their proposal and say, I think this should go directly to the board, I would have said, no way. You are circumventing the whole process that we have in place here for this board. You needed to have taken this, you had a year to take this into the committee and have them review it, have them vet it, have them look fiscally at it, have them look legally at it, and you chose not to, and I don't understand why. And why should I elevate you, one special interest group, above all the other special interest groups and constituents of the county? That's not fair. It's favoritism. And I would find that disrespectful to my board. I would find it disrespectful to all the rules and policies and protocols that we have in place. It was so disrespectful to the committee, who has opened their doors to listen to the stakeholders. So no, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. It shouldn't be allowed. It's blatant favoritism. One group over all the other stakeholders in the county gets to do a proposal that you listen to without vetting. It's inequitable. It's unfair. It's blatant favoritism, and you should not do it. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Daniel Isaacson, who will be followed by William Gary.
I'm tall, sorry. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Dan Isaacson. Thank you for extending public comment on this issue. I'm so glad to hear from such a wide variety of folks that are giving you their overwhelming reservations to this proposal. I serve on 3 boards, a county advisory committee, a city commission, 2 neighborhood groups, and volunteer with a handful of programs that fill the gap between public and private need. And after having spent time with hundreds of volunteers and dozens of executive directors around our city and county, there's a common problem that has surfaced within our community. Our volunteer pool is dropping. Volunteer community involvement, civic participation, these are the 4th branch of government, and it is every bit as important as the first 3. And every executive director, every volunteer coordinator, every administrator will tell you that it's getting hard to find people to fill their time in the public good. My fear is that you spent so much time looking as to whether you could do this, you haven't spent enough time asking if you should. There is a robust demand for volunteer time in our community for those willing to serve. It's a buyer's market. And Commissioner Farr, you're right, the preciousness of time is important. But everyone who does it, who volunteers, has at their desire to know that they're making a difference and that their time is appreciated. If we set the precedent that after having been asked by our community to give their time for help, to craft a policy critical to our county's future, only to have it cast aside in favor of a rushed process that hints at political motives, the next time we ask our community to serve, the chairs will be empty. Worse, we are witnessing a crisis of confidence in the institutions that tether our society together. When we dissolve our faith in the systems that bind us, those systems fail us. And we need our systems now more than ever. We need our faith more than ever. If we celebrate wins achieved through the erosion of our trust in our public good and our people, we invite others to do the same. And we give birth to a Cold War arms race between sides, spiraling without conviction outside the bounds of our democracy, with no appreciation for the inevitable darkness that always rises to take its place. This message isn't a warning, it's a reminder. Trust in the systems that brought you here, that elected you. Have faith in the people. Don't destroy it. Protect it. Embrace it. The Charter Reviews Committee recommended independent redistricting process is more transparent and fair compared to previous processes. It builds on the suggestions from the 2021 Independent Redistricting Committee report. Our county has big problems requiring even bigger solutions. We need every moment of your day laser focused on being curious to uncover the undiscovered idea that will deliver the promises of each of your campaigns. Let's get back to work. I have faith in you to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is William Gary, who will be followed by Tomako Sekigewi. I'll ask you to correct the pronunciation of your name for me when you get to the podium. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'm William Gary. I'm a shareholder and attorney at Harang Long, and I represent Stanton F. Long.
Excuse me just a moment, Mr. Gary. Could I ask you to just bend the mic a little bit? We're getting some feedback, and my tech folks are asking to see if that will help. Let's try a test there. We'll reset your time.
Is that better?
Keep going, and we'll see.
All right.
You know, it's still Neil. Any other suggestions? A little more. Bend it a little more, so you're speaking more down onto it. Yeah. Great.
All right. Let's try this. Is that? I'm hearing the feedback now.
Neil is. I'm going to give him. Looks like he's maybe doing some.
They're scrambling.
We've got the man behind the curtain up here, working on some fixes. Couldn't tell if he was coming this way.
I think I hear doors closing.
Yeah. Thank you for your patience. It'll not only improve the experience for us here and now, but also on the recording. So I think that's why we really want to make sure we get this right. Here he comes. Give us just a moment. Thank you.
Test. This is it working now? I will keep speaking. I don't want to intrude on others' time, so I won't go into the substance of my remarks.
Hang on just a moment. I think Neil's still working on. Yeah, maybe recite the alphabet or something. Or do you want, Neil, are you suggesting that we reset the clock and proceed with testimony, or you want to continue? Okay, great, thank you. again, my apologies and my appreciation for your patience. If you'd like to take it from the top, we will start the clock again. Please state your name for the record and begin. Thank you.
Yes, I'm William Gary. I'm an attorney at Harang Long. I represent Stanton F. Long. I came here this morning expecting to receive feedback, but not of this type. I'd like to make 3 brief points. First, contrary to what some others have suggested, the proposal by Mr. Long to create an independent 15-member redistricting commission is not some sinister plot by a special interest group to take over the county. Mr. Long made the proposal because, in his view, the proposals put forth by the Charter Review Commission do not go far enough to ensure that redistricting is a neutral, apolitical process that is neither controlled nor influenced by those who have a personal stake in the outcome. The proposal is not Mr. Long's. It is substantively identical to Initiative Petition 14, a statewide legislative redistricting proposal that was put forward by a coalition of organizations called People, Not Politicians, that includes, among others, Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, and OSPRG. It did not originate in some conservative think tank. Second, although I do not know what legal concerns have been raised by County Council in secret advice to the Commission, I do know that Initiative Petition 14 was upheld against a pre-election challenge by the Oregon Court of Appeals in a case called Mason versus Griffin-Valada. And since Mr. Long's proposal closely mirrors Initiative Petition 14, it is a safe bet that this measure would survive any pre-election challenge as well. I also know that any post-election challenge to the substance of the measure is also unlikely to succeed because Article 6, Section 10 of the Oregon Constitution expressly gives the voters of Lane County broad home rule authority to devise a county government structure of their choosing. That home rule authority undoubtedly includes the authority to decide how districts will be drawn and by whom. And finally, I want to emphasize what we're asking the Commission to do and what we're not asking you to do. We are not asking you to enact this into law. We are not asking you to decide that this is the best proposal. We are simply asking you to let the voters decide. That is what direct democracy is all about. Please vote to put this measure on the ballot.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Tomoko. I will let you say your last name correctly for me rather than me once again mispronouncing it.
It's Tomoko Sekiguchi for the record.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Tomoko Sekiguchi, and I'm a retired computer programmer and researcher from the University of Oregon, and now an active citizen involved in our community. I reside within Commissioner Trieger's district, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you during today's public hearing. I'm here to express my strong support for the recommendation made by the Charter Review Committee and to voice my opposition against the proposals put forward by Mr. Stan Long. It is imperative for integrity and functionality of our government that all processes, especially those pertaining to amendments of our county charter, are conducted openly, fairly, and transparently. Such standards ensure that all voices are heard and that changes reflect the collective will and best interests of our community. The Charter Review Committee composed of dedicated citizen volunteers, has diligently worked for over a year to review and propose a set of thoughtful amendments to our charter. Their commitment and the process they followed should be respected and upheld. Introducing a new unvetted suggestions at the last moment undermines not only their efforts but also established protocols designed to maintain transparency and public trust in governmental processes. This raises a significant concern. Why were these suggestions by Mr. Stan Long not submitted earlier in the process? Introducing them now after a comprehensive review period has concluded disrupts the procedure and disregards the extensive work already completed. Therefore, I urge the board to support the recommendations of the Charter Review Committee. These recommendations have been vetted and crafted through rigorous inclusive process, reflecting a broad and considered perspective on the future governance of our county. Thank you once again for this opportunity to share my views. It's discussions like these that strengthen our democracy and reinforce foundations of our community governance. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Betsy Heitz, who will be followed by Douglas Bovee.
My name is Betsy Hitz. I live in Springfield. Good morning, Chair Trieger and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this public hearing. I am here to voice my support for the Charter Review Committee's recommendations and to express my opposition to the suggestions recently submitted by Mr. Stan Long. These last-minute proposals should not be treated with equal weight as the committee's recommendations. This committee has been working for over a year. They have submitted their recommendations in good faith. They did what you asked them to do. Please don't disrespect a year's worth of dialogue by the Charter Review Committee and the hard work of our first ever independent redistricting committee. Mr. Long's proposal would enshrine a hard boundary between the current North and South districts, packing Whitaker into the South District and making the North District easier for a conservative to win. This is what is known as gerrymandering and is very concerning. Additionally, any mapping adjustment made now is not transparent and does not respect the hard work of the city's independent redistricting committee. The citizen-generated charter amendment recommendations promote clarity and citizen participation. For example, changing from word names for districts to simple numbers makes sense and is consistent with city, ward, and state district numbering systems. Beyond this, Mr. Long's recommendations would make it harder for citizens to volunteer to serve on future charter review committees by imposing restrictions that would make it difficult for some people to participate. For instance, people unfamiliar with the complicated process, young people, people from marginalized and overburdened communities, and disabled people. Adherence to established processes and respected norms combined with robust public review and transparent processes is what good government is all about. I urge my commissioner, Commissioner Lovall, to support the recommendations brought forward by the Charter Review Committee. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Last person signed up in Harris Hall is Douglas Bovee, and then I'll turn it over to Tanya for online comment.
Good morning, Commissioners. Hopefully we're not getting the static and feedback as before. My name is Douglas Bovee. I live in Springfield. Thank you for the opportunity to share my perspective for the public hearing concerning the charter amendment process. I am here to express my support for the amendment recommendations of the Charter Review Committee and to oppose the recent proposals of Attorney Stan Long. The committee you properly established composed of citizen volunteers, and we heard a really good description of the importance of volunteerism earlier, met throughout last year to determine and recommend changes to our county charter. They completed the task you gave them. Why would you consider throwing over this vetted set of recommendations for some suggestions submitted at the last minute by a single citizen, which would reduce citizen participation and change district lines so that some citizens would not be fairly represented? Redistricting is complicated and should be handled with the utmost care and transparency. That is good governance. Your actions, including attention to staff time and cost, should instill trust and encourage engagement. Dismissing recommendations made by the Charter Review Committee and taking up last-minute proposals made outside the established public and transparent process is very concerning and undermines confidence in you as a board and in government more broadly. I call on my Commissioner Lovell, to honor the work of the committee and support the recommendation of the Charter Review Committee. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. I will turn it over to Tanya now to manage the online queue, and then I'll check back to see if anyone arrived late in Harris Hall and would like to speak to this item.
Thank you, Chair. If you are online and would like to give public comment for the charter review, please raise your virtual hand. Jolene, I have asked you to unmute. Hi, would you like to be on camera?
Sure, that's fine.
I'm going to promote you to panelist.
Okay.
You'll need to accept that.
Sure.
And now you can show your camera.
I need to do that. Oh, I see. Okay. Got it.
There you go. And now you may begin your public comment.
All right. Hello. Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Jolene Simpson. I'm a Eugene, Lane County resident living in River Road neighborhood. I'm speaking this morning regarding the redistricting proposals. As you know, redistricting decisions have far-reaching influence on county governance for years to come. Recently, work done by the Charter Review Committee and the Independent Redistricting Committee has been extensive, thorough, public, and transparent. Individual recommendations should be made and acknowledged during public comment. Mr. Long's proposals regarding redistricting should not be treated with the same or equal weight as these committee recommendations. Perhaps Mr. Long's proposal has some unintended consequences. I appreciate Mr. Gary's statements regarding the proposals. Unfortunately, in my opinion, this proposal doesn't pass the sniff test in terms of redistricting and charter review, and raises my suspicions regarding attempts to pack county districts with certain kinds of voters, which could ultimately distort democratic principles and bend county government representation. I remind you of your responsibilities to maintain public trust in public government. I urge you to honor the process and the work of the Charter Review Committee and the Independent Redistricting Committee and maintain that stance. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. I see Sean Shivers. I've asked you to unmute. Hello, would you like to be on camera?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I'm going to promote you to panelist. You need to accept that. And now you can show your camera.
Is it working?
It's coming. Yep, there we go. And let me reset the clock and you may begin your public comment.
Lovely, thank you. So my name is Sean Shivers. Over a year ago, I applied to be on the Charter Review Committee. I did it because I care about the community, because I wanted to participate, and because I believe in democracy. This alternative proposal is a slap in the face of me and everybody who participated on the panel, or on the committee, rather. About halfway through, like 6 months into the process, one of the members had life happen and they decided to step down from their participation. During that process, I was contacted again, asked if I was willing to participate, offered another opportunity to participate in the Charter Review Committee, and I was really disappointed when I did not make it. But I trust in the process, I trust in the commission, and I trust in the county commission. So it's incredibly disheartening to see that none of the public participation throughout that process matters. When folks can come in at the last minute and throw whatever they want at the wall and get the same level of respect and attention that the dedicated volunteers have put their time and effort into. Throughout the process, every citizen has had the opportunity to come in, voice their opinions, and express their interests. So to have this show up at the last minute is, I think, dishonest, disheartening, and a slap in the face to me and everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comments. Morgan, I've asked you to unmute.
Hi.
Hi, would you like to be on camera?
No, I'm audio only today.
Okay, let me reset the clock. And you may begin your public comment.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. This is Morgan Monroe. I'm joining you from the Oregon coast with my family today, so I'm just on audio. The Gary Long proposal is clearly not ready for the ballot. At the last public hearing on this, Mr. Gary himself asked to be able to review and edit his own proposal. And review is certainly needed, but don't do it in a backroom deal. Convene a task force or a committee to revisit our Lane County redistricting process and parameters. Hold public meeting, gather public input, hear from your own staff and subject matter experts. Be transparent. The Gary Long proposal may have begun life as the People Not Politicians effort of Petition Initiative 14, but important, very intentional changes have been made that corrupt both the independence and the efficacy of that effort. Mr. Gary claims it's identical, but it isn't. There's a reason that major concerns are being raised on this proposal. It is far from identical to Petition Initiative 14. Does Mr. Gary hope that no one will read the proposal he submitted? That no one will notice the important changes that have been snuck into it? Why are they so committed to avoiding public review of these ideas? Well, perhaps it's because under the Gary Long proposal, one of the changes is that every single redistricting committee member would be handpicked by sitting commissioners. Every single member. Additionally, key principles of democracy, such as equal representation under the law, that voters should choose our elected officials and not the other way around, and that it's the people who vote, not the land, are all seriously undermined and intentionally sabotaged by the combined impact of the redistricting proposal and the proposed district definitions. Don't put your thumb on the scale of our democracy. Please let the sun shine on any idea before you move it to the ballot. Convene a task force or a committee and robustly review any proposals related to redistricting and commissioner district definitions. Operate in full transparency. Why rush this serious and important issue? Good process matters. Transparency matters. Using county resources responsibly matters. Don't place ideas on the ballot on a whim. If community members want to bring an idea forward and can gather the needed signatures, they're always welcome to do so. As commissioners, we need you to be judicious, transparent, and thoughtful with our county, our charter, and our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comments. Chair, I do not see any other hands raised, so I will return the meeting back to you.
Thank you, Tanya. Is there anyone else in Harris Hall wishing to speak to the board on this matter this morning? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. I will see if there are any further comments from staff before I turn it over to the board for deliberation. Okay, then you are standing by in case comments from the board elicit any questions for staff. And with that, to the board. Commissioner Senega.
Looks like I'll start. Thanks everybody for all the comment again. I would just like to say that this is part of the process. We all agreed 5-0 to have this public input, and I believe that a citizen that puts forth a possible charter amendment has the right to do that. You know, we've all focused on the harangue and long, but you know, Landwatch also put forth one on June 21st, if I look back at my notes, I think, and it's a great one. I'm considering that one as well, but there's no public comment on that one. We're talking about the supposed end run, and it's not an end run. This is part of the process. Just because you're not on the Charter Review Committee doesn't mean you don't have input on it, right? That's why we're all here. And, you know, I'm really surprised to see something put forth that is supported by the NAACP, by the League of Women Voters, get this much pushback. I mean, that is when we're talking about transparency. The Charter Review Committee did a great job. They did do a great job. But if you look back at what the Charter Review Committee was for and is designed for, it's just that. It's a Charter Review Committee. They had mission drift. They're not a charter adding committee. So, I mean, these are all things that we need to take a look at and think, why does this have to be a supposed end run? This is all part of the process. They knew there would be public comment, and they knew that citizens could bring amendments. This isn't shocking. This isn't new. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be next.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a delicate topic, as you can tell by the awkward silence. You know, there's a very varied ways of looking at this issue. Obviously, when you start throwing words like gerrymandering and all the political buzzwords that makes people hot and angry into the collar, you start to get a very narrow focus of really what's going on. So let me illustrate a little bit where I'm coming from as the Springfield County Commissioner, and thank you for my Springfield constituents for coming here. We don't get a lot of public testimony, so I appreciate us having a t-shirt in the game. But I think what's disturbing about me is the previous board had selected the members of this committee, and there were some concerns that I had about who was on the membership board. And those concerns, I think, were validated when part of Springfield's district was then the map was changed to loop in 1,300 voters on the backside of Hendricks Hill. Now, I've been a long-time Springfield resident, and I went to a neighborhood meeting over there in Hendricks Hill to kind of meet my new constituents and see what's going on. And I couldn't have been in a more challenging room, I guess is the word I want to look at. The people there were great people. They had good intentions. They had good priorities. But those priorities were as far away from Springfield's priorities as you could imagine. And I'm wondering why there's so much discussion about this word gerrymandering when the previous commission did exactly that. They didn't look at the cohesive voice of Lane County. Lane County has 5 distinctive voices in it. We have 2 rural districts by population. We have 2 votes by Eugene's population and about 1 vote by Springfield's population. I'm sure in a room all of us would agree that those particular 5 entities.
Excuse me, someone online is not muted. Thank you.
Those particular 5 entities have a very different priority list on how they want to live in Lane County. South Eugene District in the neighborhood I met, their priorities were dog parks and making sure there was dog supplies to pick up dog stuff there, okay? Springfield's priority happens to be a little differently. Obviously, we don't want that in our neighborhoods, but Springfield's priority is to get Springfield revitalized, bring us economically viable customers and companies to our area, to make us a more inclusive environment, which I'm proud to represent Springfield in that endeavor. The other thing that you might want to think about is why, with these words being thrown out, these political words being thrown out, this gerrymandering thing, why is it that the maps needed to be changed in the first place last time? Think about that. The state requires that by population, each district is within 10%. We were well within that limit. So why did the district maps have to change at all during the last session? Why did it then look like we needed to loop in 5 different pieces of Eugene in each of the 5 districts? Now, to me, if you're talking gerrymandering, that seems a little weird to me. Why does Springfield have to have a piece of Eugene represented when it really doesn't have the same values and priorities? Why does West Rural Lane County have the metro version of Eugene in it when it really doesn't have the same values? Melanie was here. Why does her store need to be looped in a portion of Eugene when Blue River is as far away, economically prioritized way as any way you can think of from Eugene? That, to me, speaks of gerrymandering, and I think that needs to be corrected. So by having a committee that is not appointed by me, I don't pick my best guy who then picks his best guys, and that becomes a slant version of what some people perceive this board has a 3-2 majority, which it doesn't. But to me, some of the things that Long's proposal brings up speaks more independently and fairly of how a committee of citizens could be selected, and I think it's worth consideration. I don't think it's worth saying, oh, we're just going to automatically throw that up on the ballot. I don't know where that came from, but that's rumor mongering, if you want a word for that. We are considering where to go forward here. We are considering the costs of going forward, and we're going to be as transparent as possible. And I appreciate the fact that you come in to give us your time to give us your opinion about what you think about it. But I just wanted to let you know where I was coming from as a Springfield County Commissioner, that this is a very interwoven issue, and I don't intend to knee-jerk reaction anything about this, nor do I intend to purposely put something on the ballot in November just because we're facing a deadline. We've got time to think about this, we've got time to discuss this, and frankly, we've got time to vet it and make it better than what we have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Buck.
Sorry, was that me?
Yes, sorry, Commissioner Buck. Yes, please.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if you want to organize the conversation, maybe more specifically to each of the items from the Charter Review Committee. This is a question to my colleagues, just to be able to get through the conversation this morning. Do we want to organize it to review the repeal items first and the revisions second? For me and the audience, I think that might be helpful for them to follow, for us to make decisions in some kind of order and comment in a particular order. This is just an open question to my colleagues.
Thank you, Commissioner. You read my mind in part. I had a variation on a theme of a comment along those lines. We'll see if Commissioner Farr wanted to weigh in a sort of a first round before we start talking about how we want to maybe organize a conversation.
Well, the only thing I'll talk about, I do agree that we need to get through all of the recommendations of the Charter Review Committee, and some of them may pass, some of them may not pass. Some of them may move forward, some of them may not move forward, but we need to get through all of them today at this point. I'll state right up front, I'm not in favor of the issue of a redistricting committee not being selected. I'm not in favor of making a decision on that one today. In the interest of what one testimony said, hearing all voices, hearing all voices before we make decisions is an important element. Saying, well, your voice came too late, I don't think there is such a thing as too late. Voices should be heard. And I agree with whoever said that, and I think several of you did say that all voices should be heard. I agree. That being said, there's a term that is thrown around a lot, and it's called gerrymandering. And I don't like that term. It's not something that makes a great deal of sense to me, because anybody will use it and anybody will claim it and anybody will make absolute true statements about the use of gerrymandering. In this room, it may have been 2 years ago, I asked a member of the who ultimately was a member of the Charter Review Committee, but was a member of the Redistricting Committee, about state districts. One state district, House District 11, at the University of Oregon, and Shed in the same House district. And I asked if that was an example of good districting, and that committee member said yes. Well, I can't imagine any way Shed and the University of Oregon could be members of the same good, well-apportioned district. So people have different, that being said, he thought it was, I thought it wasn't. So people have different views on what gerrymandering actually is. Now, for me personally, I just won my 4th election to county commissioner. 12 years ago, I won in a district. 8 years ago, I won in a district by a landslide, both times. 4 years ago, I ran in a district, won by a landslide. And in May, I ran in a newly formed district and won by a landslide. So that being said, districts will listen to the person, hopefully will listen to the person running and elect the right person. But I'm not in favor of diluting districts. And anybody in this room who thinks having 5 commissioners from Eugene would be a good thing, raise your hand. I don't think anybody would raise a hand. The way the last redistricting committee presented the redistricting to us, and I voted yes on it, by the way. It was a 4-to-1 vote. I voted yes on the current districts. It was a 4-to-1 vote. I didn't know it allowed for 5 commissioners from Eugene, and it does. I didn't know it allowed for 5 commissioners from School District 4J, but it does. That being said, what they gave us was an imperfect solution, and we ended up choosing an imperfect solution. I'm in favor of moving forward with something that is more close to perfect, not that anything is perfect, and no matter what anybody does, somebody's going to say, hey, that was gerrymandered. Whitaker was gerrymandered out of the North Eugene district. Whitaker was gerrymandered back in. Ferry Street Bridge was gerrymandered out of Springfield and into North Eugene. Well, gerrymandered back into South Eugene. It's all, gerrymandering is rhetoric, and anybody can claim it at any time. So let's move forward with an open discussion. And when we are ready to make a recommendation to ask the voters how they want a redistricting committee to look, when we are ready to do that, then let's have it be an open discussion, not one that's cut off at a certain point in time, and not one that's cut off because you were chosen to be on a committee that talked about it. As several of you testified, all voices, not just committee members, all voices need to be heard. And most people that I talk to haven't heard a thing about this. So.
Thank you. So to sort of bridge these conversations and to pick up on Commissioner Buck's suggestion, we have before us 6 recommendations from a charter review committee, and a lot of the conversation about charter review has sort of been centered around redistricting because there are charter amendment proposals, both from our committee and from the public, that speak to redistricting. As several of my colleagues have said in different ways, we don't have to move anything forward, and we will always have opportunity to consider redistricting, both how we structure the process for determining proposed changes to the district maps, how we ultimately adopt those maps, and so on. So I'm a little concerned about the conflating of a lot of work done by a committee with one particular topic. And so I'm looking for a conversation across the 5 of us of how best to move our work forward. My one recommendation I would have, and then I do want to make a specific comment to the proposal before us from the community versus from our committee. But my recommendation is we do have a good amount of time set aside on next week's agenda for this item as well, that maybe we take a breath and then look back at these recommendations, beginning with the repeals, which are the items we have heard the least amount of input, and so we have had the least conversation about the viability, the interest, the utility of considering those. And then we gauge where we are for time today, and we either have more conversation about some of the proposed amendments, or we move that forward to next week. In either case, we're going to need some time next week, is my guess, because even if we come to some agreement about any repeal items, we're going to have a amended board order brought back and so on. So is that making sense as a way to proceed? I get a thumbs up from my left, thumbs up, a nod, a sure, looks good. Okay. The one thing I do want to take my time in terms of reflection and response to the public hearing is first and foremost to thank everyone who came out and to thank folks online who gave us their comment, and to thank everyone who sent us emails. There have been a lot of them, and that's good. That's what we all want, and that's what we are all needing to help us make the best possible decision. I just want to point out, I don't necessarily oppose that there is a proposal that came to us from an individual. I think the concerns are the pathway and that the lack of vetting of that proposal. And so I'm hearing some people might be interested in that proposal having more assessment. So we can talk about that another time. For me, the most significant difference between that proposal, there are many particulars, but between that proposal and our committees is our committee's recommendation is for a process, and the individual's proposal is for a process and effectively achieves a redistricting through a charter amendment. And to me, that is what is problematic about it and not transparent. It doesn't convene a redistricting committee to look at borders and talk about apportionment. It doesn't align with decennial census data. It's outside of every norm, and it creates a district in the charter through a charter amendment about a redistricting process. And that is not good practice for redistricting. So that is my primary and chief. I could pick apart the proposal as I could analyze our committee's recommendations, but that is why, that is my most significant concern about that. I also, on behalf of the NAACP, the League of Women Voters, and other coalition members, need to point out, because it has been declared that there is a lack of understanding of why there would be opposition to something that those groups support. Those groups signed on to a coalition several years ago supporting a statewide measure about state legislative seats. That's what IP14 is. They have not signed on to any local Lane County redistricting proposal that mirrors that. And that statewide proposal is on hold, likely until at least 2028, and it is about state legislative districts, which are partisan districts, and a lot of what IP14 is about is how a committee is seated to ensure representation from all major parties and non-affiliated voters. It's very different, and I believe not applicable here. So that is my commentary for now on that. So, looking at the 3 items for repeal, staff, do you want to maybe bring that slide up to help shape our conversation? And looking at where we are time-wise, we've got a little bit of time. We do have to come back and do our consent calendar and allow a little bit more time for some board business before we recess for lunch. But we do have time to maybe walk through the 3 repeal recommendations and have a conversation about those.
Would it be helpful if I give a bit of the background and the discussion that the committee had on each of these items to kind of refresh you all as to where they had?
Yes, please.
So the first repeal section up for discussion is around the spending limitation. So this was established prior to current state laws and practices that govern spending by the county. The terms used within this section, as clarified by our budget staff, they did determine that they're out of date, and they have since shifted in meaning since this provision was included within the charter. The committee ultimately deemed that there was no modern purpose for this section within the charter. The county is currently out of compliance with some elements of this provision as they are no longer applicable, and it largely serves as a historical artifact and provides no or minimal value to the county.
Do you want to just walk through all 3?
Oh, do you want to go through all 3 or just
Yeah, I think so, because we're familiar, but this is just a good refresher, and then we will go back, take it from
the second repeal section on East Alton Baker Park. So this provision about East Alton Baker Park was established when the county still owned the land. This land has since been transferred to the city of Eugene. As the committee stated, the primary value of retaining this section would be as a historical artifact similar to this previous section, developable land within the urban growth boundary may benefit from greater flexibility governing its use, and the committee largely agreed that this provision served little purpose for the county. And then finally, Section 34, the income tax cap. This was established at the same time that a companion provision to create a county-level income tax was voted down. The provision restricts how an income tax would be used, but no county-level income tax. So as the committee had discussed, there's no current need to restrict how a non-existent tax will be spent, and any future implementation of an income tax would best be served by the opportunity to define and determine parameters that suit that moment. So be more flexible if and when there is an income tax actually established prior to having to abide by historical items within the charter.
Thank you. So I suggest we have a conversation about each one of these items on their general merits, and I think also keeping in mind our sense of what it would take to bring voters along, right? When some of us have been on this board, others have not, when we have advanced a county-wide proposal. We were all here for renewal of the public safety levy. Some of us were here for a new parks levy, and understand the importance of a unified voice from the board. If we can all agree, then we're all going to work with voters to help them understand and agree why this matters for the county and for the people we serve. So maybe we can walk through these thinking about both our own position on it, but also how we think we might communicate with voters, because putting something out there that we don't have confidence in voters understanding or moving forward may or may not be a good idea. So with that, I would open it up for questions, comments about the spending limitation, Section 32, suggested repeal. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'm supportive of these repeal measures. All the explanations from the committee make sense to me. I think my question really lies in, should we move these forward? Should we all agree to move these 3 repeals forward? How do we explain it to the public? And it sounded like when we had Ms. Dawson here that we would need to put in something in the voters pamphlet with the explanation. And we would have, I think we may have enough time to put that explanation in before this November election. I just want to confirm that. And it sounds like we would, if we did move forward with these, we also would need to have a small committee put together in order to come up with the ballot titles. And I don't know if they'll also do the explanation. So that's just an open question to staff there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. And we do have Steve Thiel from our Office of County Counsel here. It is my understanding, your recollection is correct, we would develop a committee that would write, there would be an explanatory statement and then potentially a statement in opposition or support could go in the voter pamphlet. But I believe anybody could put a statement of opposition or support in the voter pamphlet. We would be responsible for the explanatory statement. Is that right?
The explanatory statement, yes, and then the board has the option per the code to also have that, or a committee develop arguments in favor of a proposal, and rather than in opposition.
Does that answer your question enough, Commissioner Buck?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I think this is pretty straightforward and non-controversial, really. I'm hoping that my colleagues will feel the same. Thank you.
If I could just state just briefly, adding to Mr. Thiel's comments, the order that's in your packet also has an attachment, and so those are 6 spelled out ballot titles, the question, a summary. So that information is already put together that County Council did establish. So there is a baseline of understanding and information about each of those items. It's just really the additional explanatory statement that would be your option to do.
So are you suggesting, and Mr. Thiel, can you confirm these would not a ballot title go through a little more process, or would these be the ballot titles that are in our packet today?
Well, these are the at this point, draft language that legal counsel developed. Certainly, the board can choose to have those reviewed further. At this point, it's language that has passed legal counsel's review.
Thank you. Other comments, questions for staff on the item of repealing the spending limitation? I will just note, on general principle, I also support this repeal. My concern is going simply to be with the voters understanding, moving beyond the simplified, removing a spending limitation. If I were sort of average voter, not digging deep, not reading carefully, would wonder why this is, why there shouldn't be some kind of cap or limitation to government spending. And so that would be incumbent on each of us to help the voters understand why this matters. So as a matter of sort of good governance and simplicity and neutrality and functionality for the organization, I would support that repeal, but that would be my concern. Commissioner Senega.
Yes, I share some of the similar concerns, and also the East Alton Baker Park. Is that going to change any of the uses of it? I know that would probably be.
We'll move on to discussing that one in a moment.
Oh.
Yep. Just talking about the section 32.
Oh, Buck.
The moment.
When Commissioner Buck said all three, I thought we were talking about all three.
I think if we just have a discussion about each one, then we can go back and say, do we want to look for a motion with the order before us with them amended based on which one somebody wants to float, putting before voters. Commissioner Farr.
Nothing. I'm just
sorry.
waiting for the motion.
Okay. And I will just say, just looking back at my notes, when the committee reported to us on this, the 2011 Charter Review Committee also recommended repeal of this section, although it was section 35 at that time. And the reasoning was the same as it is now. It does take a little bit of staff time each year to stay compliant because there's some reporting that has to happen about that, but it is outdated. It doesn't add any value. And this spending limitation was put in place, I believe, prior to 1986 when the voters passed measures 47 and 50 and the Secure Rural Schools funding went away. And so that's why this is sort of an irrelevant item in our charter. All right. I see you, Vice Chair. And Commissioner Farr, just to be clear, I think because the order before us includes all six, we'll have to wait for an order to move the, a motion to move the order amended. And that's when we can, right? Yeah. Vice Chair.
Just real quick question. If we're forming a separate committee for this or another task force, is that something that the Charter Review Committee that's still on take this on, or is there some way that we can't do that symbiotically?
I'll look to.
I mean, if I'm looking for time efficiency rather than have to go through the whole process in 2-3 weeks and we get up that deadline, then everybody's rushing on a pre-med. Is that something that the Charter Review Committee could take on this particular 3 items if we're talking about the single one?
Well, say members of.
Right.
It's 3 to 5 members is all for these for the explanatory statement committee. And it wouldn't necessarily, certainly not by any language in the law or the code, is it tied to the Charter Review Committee. So I don't know that there's anything preventing you from choosing the 3 to 5 members from that committee, but it doesn't require it.
Perfect, thank you.
And Vice Chair, I believe in the past, and help me with this, County Council, we often, when we've had explanatory statements, we give direction to the administrator to seat the committee and get the work done. So it doesn't go through the whole applications and board appointments. It's a much more streamlined, simple administrative process.
Okay, good, thanks.
Okay. Nothing else on the spending limitation item. Let's move on to talk about East Alton Baker Park, and Commissioner Senega had a question. But a reminder, this is an artifact in our charter. We no longer own the property.
Correct. But I couldn't find anything confirming if this, because there's a lot of wording in there about what this can be used for, can't be used for. Is this going to have any effect on that we know of? Even though it's not ours?
So Dan Hurley, our Public Works Director, had also spoken in favor of, or he had emailed in favor of this repeal to the Charter Review Committee. To my knowledge, there was no specified change in ways that the land could be used because we don't currently have any authority or governance over East Alton Baker Park.
That's my understanding as well. Okay.
I think that any constraints around use were conferred upon the sale of the property to the city of Eugene. So now that lives with the city of Eugene. Commissioner Farr, did you have?
I have a bit of background on this. I was a city councilor for 10 years, Eugene city councilor for 10 years. And, you know, it's always been the family of Steve Prefontaine, for instance, had concerns about change of use that would eliminate some of the legacy naming and legacy use of the East Alton Baker Park. It was confirmed to me a long time ago that such a move would not do so, that the current use of the park is governed by the city, and that the city doesn't have any proposals or intention to change its current use. It used to be a garbage dump, you know.
Yeah. And in fact, I did a little bit of had a conversation with the mayor about this, just to let her know this was coming before us. And what I think I knew and forgotten is this broader area that was sold is now, there's the Willamette natural area. So there is a city committee that's tasked with that portion of Alton Baker Park. And then there's the more recreational park area we're familiar with Priest Trail and the disc golf course and so on, but all of it is under the city's jurisdiction. And my only question or concern might be if the city wants to make any changes, whether having it still in our charter could create any complexity for them. I don't think so, but.
I don't think it carries any weight.
Yeah. So it really is, this again is simply what I would consider a sort of housekeeping, streamlining, organizational efficiency, neutrality, greater clarity item. Okay. Anything else on that one? Then the income tax repeal recommendation, and this is right when there was a tax and the cap at the same time. The tax failed, the cap passed, and so we have a cap on a tax that doesn't exist in our charter.
Comment.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just, I've heard some people talk a little bit about the nuances of this as we're forming a public safety task force. If this was to stay there, I believe it's capped at 2%. Is that something that would interfere with the task force work if it stayed, or if it went away, would that help their work? I guess that's the clarifying question that some people have asked me to ask.
Is that directed towards me? Right?
Well, you direct for anybody who could answer any of that would directed toward.
and I don't know that I have a very specific answer for you, Vice Chair, other than whether it's from the Public Safety Task Force or elsewhere, if an income tax was imposed as of now, this 2% limitation would seem to apply to it.
Right. So I guess for discussion's sake, which, I'm kind of on the fence about this, is if we decide to take this out, then we would have to go back to the voters again once the task force, if the task force wanted to create some sort of fee usage tax for funding public safety, we would have to then bring that before the voters again. Whereas some people are saying, if this is already here, could that 2% be put over the top of a public safety task force initiative to, maybe come back to the voters and say, well, we have this 2% here of income tax. Let's use 1.5 points of that for funding public safety. That's some of the discussion that's been happening in my email thread. So I put that out just for discussions. I don't know where to go with that. That's just information that's in my head. I need to kind of put in little index cards.
If I could, Council, this is specific to an income tax, so it wouldn't affect any property tax increase, any newly created special district or fee. It's specific to an income tax only.
Correct, and my reading is that it certainly doesn't authorize any tax without other action being taken anyway.
Right, and in that section 34, it doesn't dictate what it can be used for either. So that was my question, is if it's not dictating what it can be used for, it could be used for Anything?
It actually does, dedication for public safety.
Right.
Yeah. Minus administrative cost. Shall be dedicated to public safety, yeah. I think the understanding was if we were to repeal this because it refers to a specific income tax that doesn't exist and later create a new taxing district or something that requires a vote of the public, any kind of cap or limitation would be crafted to go along with that. So it would be contextual to the time, as opposed to trying to put that square peg into this round hole that exists for something that was crafted long ago, if I'm remembering the committee's recommendation and framing correctly.
Yes, generally.
Sure.
So I think for me, again, this one is similar to the spending limitation, is just having the voters understand why we would be removing a tax cap just on its surface would require some work. Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still kind of wondering if the old rule of thumb is never let an opportunity to go away. Now, I don't want to be the big black, sickle-handed person that wants to create an income tax, but at the same time, if this becomes a way that we can fund public safety, it's no secret, public safety is my highest priority here. So if this is something that could help that, because that's what it's designated for, maybe we should leave this one alone for a while, just as a wait and see. I understand and hear my colleagues saying about it's a housekeeping item, and, looking on the surface, it could be. But like I said, I don't want to miss an opportunity if there's something here.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. I eagerly await the recommendations of the Public Safety Committee. And personally, income tax, nothing's off the table as far as the recommendations that committee is concerned. But in looking at this, I don't know that losing the cap impedes their progress toward those recommendations that they're going to make, even if on the outside chance that an income tax is part of one of the recommendations they may make. I don't, in my mind, I've settled that this does not impede that work personally. So I'm cool with taking it out.
I would agree. Commissioner Buck, I saw a hand, but then it's disappeared again. Did you want to get in the queue here?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Farr just actually stated what I felt as well, so no need to repeat.
Great. Thank you. So if I'm hearing, Commissioner Sandega, did you have any? No. So first, I also just want to take a minute to say this is exactly the work we need to do. I think there's, as has often been pointed out, this board often agrees on a lot more than we disagree on, and it's often just how we arrive at that and how we frame that, and that we have really important work to do. And the public safety funding has come up is important work that we have to do. And I would agree from my reading of what's currently in the charter, from the recommendation of the committee, that taking this out in no way gets in the way of any future work we might do to more adequately fund that system. Frankly, nor does leaving it in really create any impediment. It just makes our charter busier with things that are sort of not particularly relevant, but there it is. So I think we've all had a chance to speak to the three repeal items. So I would say an option, and I'm again looking to County Council to make sure I have this right, there could be a motion put forward to approve the order before us amended to include any one, two, or all three repeals. And then depending how that went, if that passed, somebody could still later make a motion. Would it be on that same order with inclusion of the amendments? How do we want, how best to move forward to handle, hope you're following what I'm saying. I'm starting to fade a little bit.
And if I may, I think I do, and if I may make a suggestion is in terms of process here. Yeah. So the order that's in front of you today includes all six, the way it's drafted. That's the only order that's in front of you today. What I may suggest is if commissioners, if you choose one or some, but not all six of these to move forward, that you direct staff to return next week then with a board that reflects what the board chooses to propose to or forward to the voters. And also keeping in mind, if the ballot title language, if there are any issues with that the board wants addressed or changed or revised to direct staff to do that for next week as well, so that hopefully, if the board so chooses, there'd be a document in front of you next week that would be ready to go actually to the voters.
And a question on that, if we would have two orders next week, anticipating that maybe parts of this will have a split decision of the Board of County Commissioners, having two orders so that the things we do agree on can very cleanly and easily be potentially a unanimous vote, and then the things we disagree on would be separated out for separate discussion and separate vote. I'm presuming that's a part of your proposal.
Well, yes, certainly. I think logistically that could work.
Very good.
And thank you, Commissioner Farr, because that makes me think to even sort of further subdivide that. Were we to ask staff to bring us back, for example, an order with all three repeal items, then next week we would still have an opportunity to move that motion if it's seconded, have conversation to it, and then we may still pass that with an amended motion that takes one or two out. But we would have an order before us that's all three repeals.
Just to clarify, are you suggesting that they, after discussion next week, then ask staff to make some revisions, bring it back again next Tuesday, and have a final vote?
That's right. So we could,
sure.
Right. So we could look at all three repeals in one order and maybe pass that, or maybe not, but pass one of them, which would then have to come back the following.
Sure. And just for the board's information, I personally will be out next week, but certainly somebody from legal counsel could cover and make those changes along with Jenna and Judy. So.
I'll also be out, so Judy's got a lot on her shoulders next week.
I think we've had the substantive. I think what I'm trying to do is provide an opportunity for us all to just sit with this conversation a little bit about the repeal items and make sure before we come back and get to actually voting on whether or not to advance all three to the voters is what I'm looking for. So if I'm hearing, maybe there is direction to ask for an order to come back next week. That is the three repeal items in a single order. Is that the will of the board? Great.
Clean and concise, yes.
Yes, absolutely. And again, to clarify, these proposals, the current order does include proposed ballot language, including ballot title, question, and quick explanation. You have the opportunity, if you so choose, to direct staff to revise those in any specific way also, if you wanted something that's kind of a finished product for next week.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. All right. And so process-wise, I'm looking to our acting administrator. Do we need to restate that during assignments, or is this sufficient process-wise that County Council is furiously taking notes on what we've just directed? Okay, great. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Do we need a motion? Because I think I'm able to put one out there for everybody.
Well, styling it as an assignment, then you need agreement head nods.
Great. All right. So now if we want to look at the three amendment items, recommendations, to see if they're, so we really have three separate items here. We have mostly spent our time discussing one and one a little bit nested within that. Would the board like to have conversation around each of these individually? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start with the first one. So we've issued paper number 1 regarding revising the titles and descriptions of commissioner districts. And I think of all of our positions, this one makes the most sense for my district. It impacts each of us a little bit differently. But the reason I support this is because District 5, East Lane, encompasses north, east, south, and parts of the West Lane district as well, according to the residents there. And East Lane is not actually where the majority of the residents of my district live. They live in South Lane and in the Churchill neighborhood of Eugene. So I have typically always called it District 5. But in the revised titles suggested by the Charter Review Committee, it continues to have both numbers and district descriptions, which I think is still very helpful for all residents in all 5 districts. Commissioner Farr, as well as the League of Women Voters, had suggested in past meetings that the 2 Eugene districts have slightly different descriptors, north and south. I would support that particular change as well to this particular issue paper or measure we put before the residents of Layton County, if that's supportive of the majority of the commissioners. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Vice Chair, was that a raised hand? I couldn't.
I had a twitch, sorry. Yeah, I'd like to hear that read out loud. What is the recommended descriptor for the Eugene districts, the 3 and 4?
I have them here. So District 3 generally comprised of a portion of the Eugene metropolitan area, but also including contiguous portions of the county as necessary to comply with subsection D. The commissioner elected from this district shall fill position number 3. And for District 4, it's exactly the same, just with 4 rather than 3.
Okay, well, I'm not in favor of that. I believe that a geographic separation between North and South Eugene is something that needs to be maintained, and I prefer the existent charter language on that. So I'm a no vote on that one, to be clear.
Okay.
I would concur.
And I'm going to reserve comment because I think it's really important that we have a single voice on something as consequential and an investment in asking voters to change a charter. That if we're not all in agreement, it's kind of a hard sell to put it forward. So for the purposes of time and the conversation today, I certainly have opinions and feelings about this one and why, but I'm not sensing enough energy here to be a little casual about it for the juice to be worth the squeeze, at least at this time. Reminding everyone that this report exists and elections happen this November and beyond, and we can take this up again at another time. So the next item was around, oops, we lost our guide.
Bringing up the one with a lot more description.
About the redistricting. So essentially what we have are 2 charter amendments that relate to how we processes and seating committees to work through those processes. Here we go. So this is about the redistricting process and establishing the committee in the charter. It currently lives, our current process lives in the code, right? Our redistricting committee. And really redistricting generally is a thing that happens decennially. So we are not due for this for a while. So if we don't make any changes to our charter, we are still functioning and compliant and have opportunity to review and revise and to redistrict with the decennial on schedule, which would be in, when would we seat a committee in advance of a decennial redistricting? 20.
Yeah, yes, Chair. Trying to quickly do the math. I'm struggling with what today is. Yes, we can absolutely seat that committee. There's a bigger process now that there is the specific language in Lane Code. So that could take place at the same time that we're doing getting some of the census information and getting that committee seated, getting education, getting materials going, while we're still waiting the results of the census. And as I talk through it, it's right around that date, but I don't have the exact one in top of my head.
Mr. Farr, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, yeah, I think the discussion's still in process on this, so I'm not
I'm in favor of carrying this forward at least one more week for discussion, because we do have more voices that are continuing to be heard. We received more testimony this week, and more different testimony. And I'm personally, I'll speak out how I feel about it. You know, the redistricting committee really needs to be as unpolitical as possible. And that the Board of County Commissioners needs to be as far away from the process as possible. That being said, we recently had a redistricting committee that was appointed by this Board of County Commissioners, and it gave us what I call an imperfect product. It gives a product that resulted in, for one thing, 5 county commissioners being able to come from the city of Eugene. They gave us 3 maps, and once again, I was in favor. I was a 4-to-1 vote on the districts the way they are currently appointed. But I believe that it needs to be out of the hands of the county commissioners. Otherwise, every time the perceived majority of the Board of County Commissioners changes, then if it's in code, it could change again. And I thought of putting it in the charter. So as we continue this conversation for at least one more week, that will be my eye, is how do we take it out of the hands of the Board of County Commissioners as much as possible, put it into the hands of a truly, and I'll say it 3 times, truly, truly, truly independent redistricting committee.
Okay, any other comments on this? Commissioner Seneca.
Yeah, this is probably, well, maybe for all 3 of you. I have kind of a process question. What if we looked at both the proposals that are currently there for the redistricting process and found like the best of both proposals and combine those? I mean, how would that, what if we liked parts of each one and wanted to combine one and put it in the charter? What would that look like? What would that process be?
Chair and Commissioners, I think you have several options. One I'm thinking of off the top of my head, there is the existing Charter Review Committee that does still exist until October, I believe. So that is one option. Again, timing is up to you. So while we've presented deadlines to getting on the November ballot, that's certainly not the only time. So there is plenty of time to do such an endeavor. We've done, work sessions could potentially be a way to do that and talk through some of those in more depth, and or task forces are things that we've also done for something potentially like this, or a committee. So I think there's several options that do exist, and I'll turn it to County Council if there's anything that I misspoke about, or if there's anything else that I'm not thinking of.
No, I think in terms of options, that's correct. And again, I want to highlight what Ms. Williams pointed out, that as you folks know, November is not some strict deadline, that if this process needs to continue, whether it's through October with the Charter Review Committee or some other process, then certainly it's up to you guys to be able to do that. The logistics of it, we could work kind of behind the scenes to figure that out. But if there are specific aspects of any proposal that the board feels strongly about, should be included, should not be included, et cetera, certainly that can be relayed to staff as they work through this. But these types of complicated, labor-intensive processes are probably best done with an ongoing process, as opposed to trying to direct it, specific provisions from the commission. But of course, that's up to you folks.
So, Commissioner Farr, did you want to say something?
Well, mine is kind of substantive, what I'm going to say next. So, for substance, I think that as we move forward, there's been a lot of discussion regarding the Harang Long proposal that came in the letter. And Mr. Thiel, you gave us a attorney-client privilege memo on that. It was called by one person a secret, but by all accounts is something that is privileged to to our attorney and to the Board of County Commissioners. And I believe for the discussion to move forward, I'm looking for your input on this, but for this discussion to move forward, we need to relax the attorney-client privilege on that memo that you sent to us, which I believe was dated June 6, 2024. And it's entitled Confidential AC Privilege, as was discussed during this BCC work session is how it begins. So my motion would be to remove attorney-client privilege from the memo from Mr. Thiel to the Board of County Commissioners dated June 6, 2024, in order for everyone in this room to be able to see what it is that the concerns that you raised in that memo that's confidential at this point in time, to make it, to shine the light on it so that people see what the concerns are.
Commissioner Farr, I think, as you may or may not recall, because it's been 2 weeks, we were down last week, this came up and it was agreed that we wanted as a board a better understanding. I see Commissioner Buck's hand is up too, so I'll get to you in just a moment, Commissioner Buck. We wanted to understand a bit more the ramifications, the opportunity, the precedent, and the potential complexities or unintended consequences in waiving attorney-client privilege, and what that really means. And that is something we have a memo prepared for us by our interim county council services and an executive session set up as a training for us to better understand. So that may be forthcoming. What my question in follow-on to county council would be, rather than necessarily waiving that at this time until we have more information, if what's wanted is to understand the relative merits and differences between the committee's recommendation and the recommendation that came to us through Mr. Gary on behalf of Stan Long, then the Charter Review Committee could be asked to do a side-by-side to analyze, review, discuss with staff support from the Office of Legal Counsel, the clerk if need be. Those meetings would then include opportunity for public comment. They would be public meetings. So if the idea is we want an analysis of that to go through the process, because the memo was agreed to as a step in determining whether adding that proposal to our agenda in the form of a board order was even an option. So kind of what I'm hearing Commissioner Senega ask for and what you're suggesting is you want some way to have more of a discussion about the relative merits or potential problems with that proposal.
And my motion is really addresses something far more simple than that. What you're suggesting comes downstream of my motion. My motion is simply to make this information that I'm reading here, which is pertinent to this one proposal that was made here, and I would expect it from any other proposal that was being considered. But the concerns that you have regarding this proposal on this particular memo, not on all attorney-client privilege, just on this one particular memo, that it be made available for anybody to read.
I see. What I do want to call on Commissioner Buck, but I think it's a little. What I have learned is it's potentially more complex than just say this one particular memo, and that's exactly what we need some support from our interim Office of County Counsel that we will be receiving prior to next week's meeting. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I was going to mention something similar. This is a question for council because since we've been discussing this potential of making this memo available to the public, it's come to my attention that if you waive attorney-client privilege, it's not just for one memo, it's for the entire subject. And from that point forward, everything is available for review or you waive the whole thing. You can't just waive one memo on one subject. And so that's what I think we need clarification on.
Thank you. And I think, again, with sort of what is the problem we're trying to solve for, which is we want to have a freer conversation about the relative merits or viability of one proposal. We're trying to get at?
What we're trying to get at is a clear and open, transparent process where there is no secret, where there's no privileged memo, that anybody who has any interest in moving forward with this very serious and very timely issue has an opportunity to do it not next week, but now.
Chair Trigger, Commissioner Farr, So this afternoon's executive session is on this very topic and understanding exactly what the implications are. So you will have resolution today, you won't have it immediately.
With that, Chair, then I'll just hold my motion in abeyance. Maybe that'll satisfy your concerns also, that until we hear more. But be prepared for such a motion once we have the information this afternoon, because I believe that some people, that the public, that entirely wide open, and I've got quotations after quotations after quotations that I wrote down this morning to make it a wide open process, that we have all information available to all people watching.
So what I'm hearing, and again, looking at time, we agreed that we are going to have staff bring 3 orders back, the repeal orders together. We have one more of the 3 proposed amendments, which is the Charter Review Committee language. Do we want to have a brief discussion about that and then see how we want to move forward to prepare us to potentially take action or definitively not on these 3 amendment suggestions?
Chair, may I ask a quick clarifying question?
Please.
Just to confirm, the order that, the assignment is to bring back one order with all 3 repeals for next week, correct? Or are you asking for 3 orders, one for each of the repeals?
Oh.
I was a bit confused by your choice of words.
It might be simpler to do them separated out so that after discussion, if there's more appetite and willingness to do 1 or 2 of the 3, sure, rather than one with all 3 and then have to amend it.
That would be whatever the board's preference is, so I just wanted clarification on that.
It's nodding. Yep.
Sure.
Great, thank you for that. So questions, comments around the Charter Review Committee's recommendation to revise the charter regarding the Charter Review Committee? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. And I have the same reservations with the language that's presented on that the 5 county commissioners choose 5 of the 7 members, and that the 5 that are chosen by the county commission, whether it be a 4-1 majority, a 2-2-1, a 5-0, whatever it may be, that it becomes more of a political move at a point in time, a political move that affects everything downstream. So I'm not in favor of this particular recommendation.
So, to summarize, if I'm hearing, we will have 3 orders before us, 1 for each of the repeal recommendations at next week's meeting. What I don't know is what this board would like to do about the 3 amendment recommendations. Would we like those to come back to us separated to have more conversation one by one next week? Would we like this as a discussion item, once again, without orders attached? What is the will of the board? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. If I would start this off, I would say that the ship is still in choppy waters on all 3 of these issues. I personally don't support the title amendment revisions and the redistricting process in the Charter Review Committee. We're still trying to figure out if we're going to release client privilege information and what that looks like. So I would say we need to put these off for another week or 2 at least.
Commissioner Buck?
Thank you, Chair. I do actually agree with that statement. There's no rush for this particular item. And if there's not enough support to move it forward today, then that is the will of the board. If we want to in the future to have a work session on it, then we can perhaps decide at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. So perhaps what we do with these 3 amendment recommendations is do we want to add them, have them appear on the agenda as a work session to have more discussion without orders, and then perhaps what will emerge from that is a decision and a motion to create an order for any 1, 2, or all 3, just to take sort of that sense of a pressure to make a decision out of these 3 items for next week. We still, on the calendar, have time, if after more conversation there's appetite to try to move something forward on the elections timeline. Commissioner Seneca, and then Commissioner Farr.
If they all three came back with as an order, at that time we could move any forward or hold any as well, right?
Correct. When we have an order before us, we always have an opportunity for someone to move to if it receives a second, and after discussion, then it would be in that normal. I guess what I'm suggesting is, if we feel we need more conversation about these, we could separate these out into a work session item, and a result of that work session might be an assignment to bring any one, two, or all three back as an order the following week.
Yeah, my thought process was do the exact same thing as we are with the appeals and bring them back as individual orders.
Commissioner Farr?
And mine was just on timing, so we can go ahead and continue this conversation that you're suggesting. That what you're saying is that we bring all three orders back, all three recommendations back with orders attached, and I'm not sure what the orders would be. Would it be would you ask that it be the charter review amendment? Charter review recommendations, or should we have more conversation on that, and then, which leads into my question, if I may ask that question right now. I'm looking at our up schedule. We meet on the 16th, we meet on the 30th, and we meet on the 7th of August. So that essentially gives us 3 meeting days between now and the drop dead. But there's also work to be done. I hate that term. I mean, the deadline, the absolute deadline. But there's work to be done in the meantime, so I'm doing the tick-tock backwards on this. So if we were to have more discussion next week and then make a recommendation to bring back an order, that order would not come back until July 30th at the earliest. Would we still have time to do the things that necessary to get it to move forward with the November ballot, should we choose to do so?
Chair, Commissioner, we absolutely would, unless, depending on how the vote goes. But based on tracking everything, you still have that opportunity, to potentially seat a committee and discuss the explanatory statement, which you have a little bit more time, but yes.
And every day does in fact have 24 hours, right? That being said, I'm in favor of continuing the discussion next week without necessarily bringing orders back to discuss next week. Let's continue the discussion next week and look to potentially, at that point in time, craft orders or ask staff to craft orders for future consideration.
All right, seeing, yes, great, all right. We did it. And the staff have the clarity they need? Terrific. Then I will say that concludes this item. Thank you so much for bearing with us through it. Clearly some more to come, but I think we made some real progress and did come to some important agreement and are continuing to move this forward. So thank you all for that. And now back to our agenda. We still do have before us a consent calendar, and so I am ready for a motion.
Chair, I'd like to move to approve the consent calendar for July 10th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Vice Chair Lovall, seconded by Commissioner Seneca to approve today's consent calendar. All items listed here are considered routine. Materials are available online. There is no discussion to the motion on a consent calendar, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Thank you. Motion carries 5-0 to approve today's consent calendar, July 9th, 2024. And finally, we have an item from Jeff Kincaid in the matter of designating voting delegates for Lane County for the purpose of voting at the 2024 National Association of Counties Annual Business Meeting, or NACO. Good morning, welcome. I will turn it over to you for a brief presentation, and then we'll have a discussion and hopefully arrive at a decision.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Trieger, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Kincaid. I'm a Senior Operational Analyst in County Administration. Luckily for me, I get to bring the most exciting items before the board here and right before lunch. So last time I was here, it was actually before this board, actually, I wasn't here. It was during the ice storm where I was like slowly fading into darkness. So it's a lot better to be in this room with you all today. Today I'm here with an item to allow the board to designate voting delegates for the purpose of voting at the 2024 National Association of Counties, NACO, annual business meeting. And that meeting's scheduled for Monday, July 15th. This is an item I bring forward each year. The last 2 years, the board designated the county administrator as their designee. This year, I'm not aware of any commissioners that are attending, and the administrator will also not be attending. That being said, the board still has options for this. So the board can choose to appoint someone as a delegate that won't be attending. The downside to that is that they'd have to pay to register. I wouldn't really recommend that. We're paying someone to register just to text and email in votes. I don't think that's the most efficient use of time or resource. The second is we can appoint the Association of Oregon Counties as our delegate, and that could be done with this order before you today. And the third option is to appoint no one. Staff recommends that we appoint the Association of Oregon Counties. It's important that we have our voice heard at these meetings. While we only have 6 votes out of many, many counties, if we're not represented at the table at the federal level, then no one's going to speak on our behalf. So being able to delegate this to Association of Oregon Counties assures that the priorities of Lane County and other counties in Oregon are heard at the federal level. The attached board order is flexible. What I'm really looking to the board for is direction on who they would like to designate or not as their voting delegate for the 2024 annual business meeting. And you can just make that in the motion, appointing blank for these 6 votes, and then I'll fill out the order and provide it to Tanya. Chair Trieger, that's all I have for this item. I'll pass it back to you for discussion and action. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, again, for some of our newer commissioners, we have lots of opportunity to actually advocate and lobby with our federal delegation, our elected representatives in federal office. This is with our national association, so much like our state association, it's advancing a legislative and policy agenda for the association. It doesn't change anything about how we get to advocate and lobby specifically for Lane County's needs with our federal representatives. Commissioner Farr.
I'm ready for a motion if you're ready to hear it. I move order 24070908, inserting Association of Oregon Counties as the voting delegate for Lane County.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Commissioner Buck, did you want to speak to the motion? It's been moved and seconded to delegate our votes to the AOC.
Yes, thank you. I just had a clarifying question on that. Is it the executive director at AOC, or is it, so who in particular is it at AOC?
The term that NACO uses when they recommend this as an option is the president. So it would be the equivalent of it would be the leader of the Association of Oregon Counties. And I can put that specific position in the board order.
Thank you. I'm supportive.
Thank you. Then it has been moved by Commissioner Farr and seconded by, Vice Chair, thank you, that we approve Order 24-07-09-08 and insert the Association of Oregon Counties as our delegate. Any discussion to the motion, further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Passage of Order 24-07-09-08. In the matter of designating voting delegates for Lane County for the purposes of voting at the 2024 National Association of Counties Annual Business Meeting, inserting the Association of Oregon Counties as our designee. Thank you all. Commissioner Farr.
Chair Trieger, regarding the conference this week, we do have 2 resolutions that I carried forward to the Health and Human Services Steering Committee, both of which passed unanimously. We will not have anybody there to read the resolution, so I'm going to ask Blair Bryant to read the resolutions at that the business meeting.
Great. Thank you for that. Before we recess for lunch, are there any announcements from County Administration? Thank you, Mr. Kincaid.
Thank you. Chair Trieger, no, there are not.
Great. Well, then with that, at the sound of my gavel, we will be recessed until 1:30, when we'll be back here in Harris Hall for a first reading and setting of a second reading and a public hearing on an ordinance, and then to conduct the rest of our afternoon's business. We are in recess.